Holy words, long preserved for our walk in this world, they resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart.
Welcome back to Echoes of Eternity, a journey through Scripture. I'm Douglas Marquardt, and today we turn to a book, or rather two books, that remind us of who we are and where we've come from. We're looking at the books of Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And these books tell us that we are still the people of God. I want to begin by just talking about the name Chronicles. In our English Bible, we see it broken down as 1st and 2nd Chronicles, but in the Hebrew scripture, there's only one book, and the Hebrew name means Annuals of the Day. The Greek translators of the Septuagint gave it a name that means, or things left out. And centuries later, Jerome and Martin Luther helped give it the title we know it today by as Chronicles. This book is more than a history. It's a divine reminder to be a people rebuilding their lives, their city, and their identity after the exile. Now, while the books of Samuel and Kings explain how Israel lost everything, Chronicles answers a different question. The question is, do we still belong to God after all we've gone through? When the Jews returned from Babylon to Jerusalem, they came to a land that had been devastated. The walls of the city were broken down. The temple was reduced to rubble. There was no more king on the throne. But Chronicles reaches into the past to help them remember that they are still the people of God. The book reviews the genealogies, it retells the story of David and Solomon, and it points again to the covenant that shaped their national and spiritual identity. It's not just a recap of earlier books. It's a spiritual manifesto, urging the people to rebuild with purpose, rooted in their history and remembering God's promises. Chronicles opens with 9 chapters of genealogies. It traces from Adam to Saul and reminds the people that are returning from exile that they are connected to God's story. And then it moves on to David's kingship, focusing on his heart for worship, his preparation for the temple. Solomon's reign follows with the building and dedication of the temple at its center. From there, the chronicler walks us through the kings of Judah. He highlights faithfulness, points out idolatry, he talks about reforms and warnings. Unlike Kings, however, the focus stays almost entirely on the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, the remnant from which the returned exiles came. Finally, the book ends not in despair, but in hope. It concludes with the Persian king by the name of Cyrus proclaiming freedom for the people of Judah and allows God's people to return to their land and rebuild it. At the heart of the books of Chronicles, there are some key themes. There's the theme of faithfulness. You see, God was faithful to Israel before the exile, and he is still faithful after the exile. The very fact that they were able to return to their land becomes the sign of God's covenant love. And then we have the theme of kingship. And though Israel had no king at the time of this writing, the promise of a future king from David's line still stood. See, Chronicles points us forward to the Messiah. And then a theme of David and the temple. David is portrayed as the ideal king with the temple as the symbol of God's presence. Together they define what it means to be the people of God. And finally, the theme of unity. There is no more division between Israel and Judah. The people must unite as one. This unity is both historical and spiritual. We meet in this book many familiar names. We meet again David, who is the shepherd king, who is also a man after God's own heart. And then Solomon, David's son, who is the builder, and he built the first temple. And then we meet Rehoboam, whose pride caused the kingdom to divide. Then there are some other kings of Hezekiah and Josiah, both of whom were followers of God, and they sought to bring about a revival. And there was revival during their time. And then we read about Cyrus, the unlikely Persian liberator who was used by God. And through all these stories, one truth emerges, that no matter how broken the people became, God remained faithful. As we look at the book of Chronicles, back in the time it was written to remind God's people that though their kingdom had crumbled, their identity had not. They were still chosen, loved, called of God. For us today, Chronicles speaks to us in the same way. In seasons of rebuilding our lives after loss, or after wandering away from Him, we're reminded that our obedience isn't about ritual, but about trusting God. Our faithfulness is not about earning favor, but about reflecting God's love through action, worship, and justice. There are some key verses that we need to remember. And the first one is in 2 Chronicles 7:14, very familiar verse. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, I will heal their land. And then in 1 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 9, worship and serve Him with your whole heart and a willing mind. If you seek Him, you will find Him. Chronicles ends on a note of hope, a return to the land, a future for God's people. But the full restoration awaited something more. The promise of a king from David's line who would bring peace and justice and unity. That's King Jesus. In Him, the story of Chronicles finds its true conclusion. Jesus is the temple rebuilt. He is the presence of God among us. He is the King who reigns not just over Judah, but over every heart that calls Him Lord. So whether you find yourself in a season of exile or a season of rebuilding, remember, you're still part of God's story. Chronicles calls us to remember who we are, that we are still the people of God. Thank you for joining us today on Echoes of Eternity. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and share the podcast as we continue our journey through Scripture. Book by book, promise by promise. Until next time, keep walking in the story.
Holy words, long preserved for our walk in this world. They resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words